going loud. Hello and welcome to this special collaboration between me, Emma Gleadhill, and Diana Spellman of Serenely Sorted. Serenity is something that, you know, we aim for in our mental space. If only we could have serenity, particularly where being a parent is concerned, and especially with being a working parent. How can we create serenity, particularly when we've got all the mess of teenagers in our lives? So our title today, our topic today is Help, my teen's room is a mess. And I suppose what we're trying to do is merge and capitalize on the benefits of my experience as a teacher, psychologist, a parenting specialist, and a mother of a 12-year-old. So in that tween twilight zone, and Diana's experience as a consultant who helps advise people on how to sort their lives out and achieve the nirvana of serenity. So Diana, do you want to say a little more about your work?
Yeah, sure. So I created my business and a system called the Serenely Sorted system. Basically, when I was working from home, stressed with the piles building up at home and the need to focus on work, but also on family life, and that challenge, and also then the frustration of filling up all my free time with tidying, repeated tidying. And my children are sort of, you know, they're now 7 and 8, but this is the period of the last 3 or 4 years where obviously toys are a big issue. And moving forward, I also wanted them to create some good habits for tidiness, and tidying the kids' rooms absolutely always used to get me down. But since creating the Serenely Sorted system, and by the way, that's not just through, you know, trial and error, it's from my corporate background of systems and process improvement for businesses, and looking at ways to kind of improve quality but reduce the time taken. So efficient ways of keeping your home tidy, which sort of the vacuum cleaner for all the little things, you might call it. And really how we can best apply this to the little people in our lives as well, which is why I kind of connected with Emma, because obviously your experience is really about the psychology of children, and especially understanding teenagers, which I never claim with my clients to really know that in detail. So I'm going to learn something today as well. And it's all about how we can really help them. So that's why I'm here today, to share with you my experience of what the systems can be, but combined with Emma's experiences to understanding those little and slightly bigger people in our lives.
So if you're interested so far, my website is emmagleadhill.com, and you can find out more about my work as a professional coach and as a speaker and trainer in the field of how to manage your mind, how to look after your psychological well-being. And Diana, where can listeners, viewers find out more about you and
yes,
your work?
Sure. So serenelysorted.com is my website, where individuals and corporates actually can find out more, and people can work with me one-to-one, which is obviously the best way. But I also have an online course which people can learn the Serenely Sorted system online themselves as well. So, and I do have Instagram as well, which is serenely.sorted.
And I have to say, as someone who's visited your website quite a few times, it is a superb resource. There's so much that's accessible on so many different levels. So without further ado, let's crack into this topic, because yeah, there's the mess of teenage life, and it is a time when actually the brain is rewiring. There is more grey matter and white matter at any other time. And essentially what's happening over the adolescent process from 11 through to 24 is all of this spaghetti junction in the mind is streamlining and trying to sort itself out. So the essence of the teenage experience involves a certain amount of a surge in capabilities, a surge in brain power, but also a lot of chaotic aspects and a lot of impulsivity. And one of the things I think that we need to bear in mind is where we're coming from as parents when we encounter mess. It's triggering. It is triggering. We look around and we see yet another thing on our overloaded plate. And that can really trigger a surge of anger, rage even, and narratives and scripts coming up from the basement of our minds. For instance, echoes of our parents' frustrations with us, and rather spiky confrontations of our own past. Certain phrases resonate. Like in my family's house, with my parents, it was something about using the house like a hotel. And I nearly found myself going there with my daughter last weekend, as she was drying her hair, taking about 20 minutes to dry her hair, and she's not Rapunzel, whilst reading a comic, whilst surrounded by a whole load of detritus all over the floor. And I nearly blew my stack. I felt it all come up. And it's really important that we try to find a framework to put this behavior in so that we can meet these behaviors with understanding rather than with confrontation. So I think number one is, actually being compassionate and informed that this is to a certain extent going to be inevitable and they need our support rather than persecutory or guilt or shaming interactions around this. We want to be able to motivate them from the inside out to feel that it's going to be worth it to them to keep their room in good order. So understand your triggers, manage your mind about it. There's a famous saying in the parenting world that you've got to connect before you correct. So being able to come to a point of connection is really important. So know your own physical signs and symptoms of that Krakatoa, the volcanic eruption over the space, because it is frustrating. And the more times you have to nag and moan and ask again and again, you've got to think something's not working here. And I can't control them, but I can control how I show up. So it's a certain amount of, stop, regain control, don't get mad, really become more consequential, thinking about their behavior around their room as a matter of choices and consequences. Mm-hmm. And the important thing is that we let them feel the consequence of their room being an utter tip. We don't rescue them from it by going in to find the stuff for them or by tidying it for them while they're at school, for example. And, because then we can be fueling a certain amount of learned helplessness. So when we feel frustration rise, we need to be strategic and we need to try to access our calm. So the framework is, this is a process. All behavior is a communication. It's a skill that's not yet learned or a need that's not yet met. And some of the outer chaos that's expressed through the teenage journey is symptomatic of the inner chaos that's going on. And we've got to remember that we have the fully formed brain, the fully wired prefrontal cortex. It's wired by experience and emotional experience, fusing with cognition and memory. And our children need to borrow our receptive and creative minds in order to be able to move forward. So, tame the fury, tame the frustration, see it within that framework, and thinking instead of my child or my teen is a lazy, messy bum, they need help. How can I help? How does that resonate with you, Diana?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it is, I've experienced that with my younger kids, and it was the worst part of my mess stress. You talked about having this frustration about messy areas, and I describe it as mess stress, and it's a huge part of everyone's lives. And ultimately, that's why I call my business Serenely Sorted, is because I wanted people to feel very different to the mess stress and feel that serenity in their home. And the children's bedrooms being one major element of that mess stress. And so handling this is going to be a benefit to the parent, and also obviously to the children for lots of different ways. And obviously I'll go into some practicalities as to what you can do to make this work. But even approaching the topic, so say, for example, a parent has some thoughts as to what we could do in the kids' rooms to make a difference, to make it easier for everyone, and a system that you think or believe will work. So say the Serenity sort of system, and you want to broach this topic or start to think about helping them with this. How would you broach that topic or start the process? And also maybe a little bit about, obviously, the benefit to the parents is the room's going to be tidy and washing is found, the socks are paired, etc. But there are obviously great benefits to the children in terms of life skills for their future, etc. Maybe we can just touch a bit on that as well.
That's such an important point. We've got to have our eyes on the prize. Where do we want to go with this? How do we want them to be at 18 when technically and practically they could be leaving the home? And even if it's not at 18, even if, finances and the housing market, etc., mean it's a lot later, it's still going to be important because they're going to be living with less space still within the family home. So it's kind of eyes on the prize. What's the next stage? You want them to be able to leave home at 18 and be confident that they can function independently and flourish. And part of that is their ability to, live and work well within the spaces that they've got, manage those spaces and make them as pleasant as possible to be in, not only for their own selves, but also for socialization, being able to have friends into your room. Well, you can't if it's an absolute biohazard. So, I'm thinking, if you've got someone who's maybe 8, 9, 10 years old, they're looking to their next stage of their life, which will be going to big school. They'll be angling for all sorts of big school elements. So you can wrap it up all to do with independence, and also thinking about the next stage of challenge, which will be, they will go to secondary school, they will have many more subjects, many more teachers, and they will start to have quite a lot of homework to juggle through the week. And so it's like actually doing this in calm rather than in a reactive mode to an event that's happened, or you blowing up because you've seen something in their room that's beyond the pale. Your boundaries have been crossed. Oh my God. So instead of getting cross, circling back to it and saying, listen, I've been thinking about what this situation is, and putting it very much in terms of what's in it for them and what's in it for you. And this is about teamwork. I would absolutely banish the word chore, because who wants to do a chore? This is about how you can contribute to the family team. And now that's a really different proposition, isn't it? Instead of, this is going to be your chore every Monday night or every Thursday night or whatever, it's going to be to tidy your room. How we frame it is really important. Also, I think you need to capitalize, whether they're a preteen, a tween or a teen, capitalize on teachable moments. So, for example, your teenager is unable to find the magic top that they must wear on their night out. They can't find it. They can't find it. And instead of getting irritated by their demands on you, don't rush to find it. Say, I'm really very sorry you can't find it. Where should it be? Ask some questions to help point them to the discomfort, actually, of not knowing where their own stuff is. And not saving them, not rescuing them. This is this idea of stay calm and be consequential. So dialing down the rescuing, dialing up the consequence. And then obviously There may be a lot of storm, there may be a lot of fury, but it's something you circle back to and say, I can tell that really upset you, and it was a really bad start to a night out that you've been really looking forward to. And, you know, how did it feel? Always start with, how does it feel? Because now we're working with something from the inside out. How does it feel to be on the back foot when you want to, you know, be able to organize yourself seamlessly to go to school, to go out with your friends? How does it feel to be in a messy room? You know, what's good about it? What's not so good about it? And really try and build up a vision that comes from their inside out as to what they would like instead. How would you like it to be? And how do we get there? So you can see that's a much more constructive conversation that's likely to get a more responsive engagement.
Absolutely. And yeah, you want them to want to do it. It's always better for anything in life if it comes from within rather than, you know, the push. And I think also, I think going to university, like you say, the different stages, even if you're at that point and they haven't learned any of these skills, going to university where your room is your social space, your everything, and wanting that to be appealing is a huge kind of desire, I think, for university students. And so even if you got to that point and you feel like you've not achieved any of this, there's still time, I think. Actually, we did a talk for a program about children going to university, and it definitely resonated. So perhaps we could just talk about a few of those practical things we can actually start with. And there's so many places to start. And what I like to do is just talk about a broad framework which can be applied in many areas. And I always use the example of Lego. And because I've seen this, I saw this in a newspaper, and it kind of really, I just thought this is not what we should be putting out there, because, and it actually seen it in a home organization show as well, where they suggest that we should sort our Lego out into colours. Right now, because for the home organizer in question, this may look nice, right? And I have fallen into, you know, we've all fallen into that trap where we maybe have a few hours, and if you like doing it something, you'll make it look really aesthetically pleasing, and lovely, you know. And actually, I did do something with Lego once, which wasn't color based, but I was like, I sorted out all the wheels into one thing. And what I created, and what the Lego into colors does, is just creates an enormous amount of work that nobody wants to do. And also, it's not based on behavior or practicality or reality. And actually, Serenely sorted system is quite different than some of those other systems that you might have heard about, because, well, two reasons. One is that I was a naturally messy person, that I wanted to become tidier and create methods that I would maintain. And that leads us to the second point, is that it's realistic. It's realistic for most people to achieve, even children. And I can say this because my children, who are not yet teenagers, are achieving this with some guidance.
And one thing that I've heard you say is, you know, if we want our kids to tidy their room, the question is there, you know, do they know how?
Absolutely.
And actually what you're talking about is actively teaching the skills in order for them to fulfill this in a practical way, and in order for them to do it in a way that works for them rather than just is unrealistic and looks good.
Exactly, because you know, when children play with Lego, they just want to play with their Lego. You know, they want to root around and find the pieces. And I was putting it from my own mindset as to what might look aesthetically pleasing, and then I've changed into what is a highly practical way of behaving. So that's the first thing, is being realistic. So it's not over categorizing. We've all bought the you know, the storage furniture from like IKEA and places like that, and if it's got 12 places to put things, we might feel compelled to create 12 different categories of things, but actually you're just creating a rod for your own back, often in this case. And I've you know, for my sort of 6, 7, 8-year-old type of age children, I believe that 4 to 6 categories in their room is about right. And that's as many that they can handle themselves. And so that's how my son's room, for example, is organized. Obviously, Lego has one category called Lego. And then he has, we'll say, a while ago, when he was a bit younger, he'd have Lego, small cars, big cars. He loves his Beyblades, and maybe there's one other. That's like nerfs. He can handle those 5 things, and he knows and can find where to put those things away. If I had 8, 10 categories, he'd just end up putting things in the nearest box. And that's where it's that careful balance between making something more complicated, that basically it's that if it's easy, I'll do it. If it's a bit hard, it will all go to disarray again. So that's a really important point.
So how else can we make systems easier and therefore harder to not do for a team?
Exactly. So that brings on to the second point. So the first point is make sure they are realistic and achievable, which is the 5 categories for a smaller child, probably a few more for older. And then my second technique is, it's a combination of 2 things. As I alluded to the first example, you've got to have end homes for everything. Literally everything has to have an end home.
I love that concept. Tell us a bit more about the end home thing.
So this is sort of how you avoid I hope you don't mind me saying this, the crap basket that every kid's room has. And you get to this point where you've tidied it up, but there's still stuff. You want to get to a point where you don't have that stuff. And that's a combination of being realistic and only having 5 categories. So it's easy to put things away quickly. And that's the end home. So everything has to have an end home, from the hair bobble that comes off your daughter's hair bunch at night and she just chucks on the floor. No, there's an end home for it, through to all the toys, etc. And even things like, so on her desk, my daughter loves to do art. So she's has a done artwork, because that's the thing, the mess is, you've got to look at what's causing the mess. So the done artwork, she doesn't want to throw it away, but they just litters the desk. So there's a folder for that. Then apart from end homes, it's how we handle those end homes. And this is the concept called use in one move. Use in one move. So for example, I have a basket here on my desk. This is an end home, and this is for my sort of recording stuff when I'm doing Instagram live. So it's got like things like my tripod and a few other bits and pieces that I use. So when I go down to my kitchen, if I'm doing like a video there, I use in one move my basket. And what that means is I'm not taking out lots of individual things and putting them down on a surface and then having to handle lots of individual things to put them back. I'm just taking my basket, I'm getting out my items directly from the basket, using one move, back to the basket. So nothing to do with my end home for video making ever hits my desk or any other surface. It's always stored here. So an example of that for the children is, say, the craft cupboard, or similar homework basket. You'd have a basket containing, for example, we've got a general craft basket which contains like glue, scissors, sellotape.
Oh,
where I'm going to do that.
Diana, you just froze for a second there.
Oh,
so glue, sellotape.
Yes, so glue, sellotape. So, and then a second one might be painting or whatever, or jewelry making, or whatever your personal item or craft type things are. So it's organizing things by activity, which is sometimes quite different to what we've thought of in life. About how we should organize things, but organizing by activity means you use in one move your basket to your place where you're doing the activity and putting it back.
What I like about that, and can see being really helpful for parents with teenagers, is one of the skills in life. It's always easy to accumulate more and not really approach your possessions with discernment. And the same is true for study materials and sort of study notes, it's easy to have your folder and then a whole load of papers exploding out of it. And the idea of, one idea for good practice with homework, particularly with early teens, is not to have the bedroom as also doubling as a study, because you can't see how they're working. And I'm all for passive surveillance. So if they have files and folders that are kept in their bedroom in various sort of containers that they can then bring downstairs to do their work in a public space, you can see how much time they're spending on TikTok in between actually learning their French vocab or doing, the questions for science or whatever it is. But also that same sort of idea. They've got their stuff and it's in certain simple categories and they're able to move it around and it goes back into that simple space, so that it's when it's portable, it's got to be streamlined, and it stays that being streamlined, it stays accessible.
And that's such a good point. And in fact, I was always thinking about how I would organise my children's homework when they became teenagers. And it's very similar to what I talk about with people who are working from home. You have your work from home basket that you can use in one move from the work surface, which might be in the kitchen or next to the bed, depending on your circumstances. And to be able to also put it out of sight. And whether you're working as an adult or studying as a student or pupil, that ability to put it out of sight actually is really important, isn't it, for your mental health and well-being, because you want to be able to switch off at certain times of the weekend and evening from the homework, from whatever. And if it's there and you can see it, then that's going to trigger you. And whether that's in the bedroom or in the communal family space, that is a really great point, that maybe the place that stuff lives is neither in the bedroom nor in your living area, but in a cupboard downstairs or in the utility room. And this is, again, that whole behavior thing and thinking about activity-based end homes. Often where you end up putting things is not where you would think. Like I talk about people doing their nails in front of the TV. So keep your nail stuff in the lounge, because that's where you're going to do that. And this applies as well. And often we can turn it on its head, and it gives us that ability to focus while we're doing those things, but also unwind as well from that activity.
What I love about the way this sort of system is unfolding in the way that you explain it is that there's a kind of common language, a very simple common language that is quite resonant, and very, very helpful. So, for example, the job of the teenager is to push up boundaries. Of course it is. They're going to want more privacy. They're going to want and make as many excuses as possible for them to be in their bedroom and pretend that you don't exist, because they like to pretend that they don't need you. But for example, having everybody's end home for laptops, devices, phones, being in a sort of public space in the kitchen, so that beyond a certain time of night, there are boundaries around that use. Because in the same way that the teenage mind is going to be more chaotic, self-regulation is a skill that is learned over time through co-regulating with carers, adults in their lives. Yeah. So our job is to love and provide and nurture, but is also to create certain boundaries and frameworks which are simple, straightforward, consistent. And what I love about the language you're using is that it's non-judgmental. It's completely. And that's very important, I think.
And by the way, this is great for relationships too.
Yes, go on, say a bit more. How has that helped?
Because I had a client who said to me, this Serenely Sorted can help your relationships, because it's taking the pressure off. And this could go for any kind of relationship. It's taking the pressure off me saying to you, you're messy and I'm tidy. Can you sort yourself out, please, in this home we all live in?
You're wrong. It's your behavior, these patterns are not serving you well, rather than, because your behavior is wrong very quickly goes into I'm wrong. And that internalized shame is not a very good way in which kids start to engage, learn and grow.
And so what the Serenely sorted system does is allow you to agree as a family to take on a system that's going to make everyone's lives better for, you know, all the reasons. We all save time because you get things done quicker, you get back to tidy faster. Everyone can have more time together as a family and live in a more serene home that's just generally much tidier with less effort. And then the pressure's off the relationship and who's doing wrong and well. And
well, one of the things I would say is parents put enormous pressure on themselves by trying to control their children. And once you let go of that, we can't control them, really. From the get-go, we can't control them. They're not little puppets. But what we can do is make it very clear where their choices are and where their consequences for those choices are. So for those of you who might be listening, who feel you've got a really hard time with a teenager who is just not going to be responsive, again, that's their choice. If they don't respond to requests to cleaning the room, tidying the room, and the room becomes a biohazard, make it very clear to them, this is your choice. To not do this is an active choice. And the consequence will be, you know, your clothes will be on the floor where you leave them. They will not, and unless you put them in the laundry, they will not be cleaned and laundered for you, and you will run out of clothes. And the backstop is, you can live like this, you can choose to live like this, but we are likely to want the window open and the door shut so the smell doesn't pervade the house. And once a month, you know, you can live like that, but at the end of every month of living like that, you will be obliged to, side by side with me, take everything out of the room, put rubber gloves on, biohazard, and clean every surface and put everything back. And so there is a kind of absolute consequence. There are absolute consequences. Another consequence, for instance, is you will not be able to socialize in a room that is a biohazard. And therefore you don't have any private space in the comfort of our home where you can host your friends, etc. So those are some ways in which you can, you know, and again, stay really calm about that. This is your choice. But if you don't exercise the, you know, if we all have a choice, and if we don't make a good choice, we're going to experience some consequences. And allowing that to be felt and experienced is, you know, without a little bit of risk, there's not a lot of reward. And so if we save our kids all the time from the consequences of their either actions or inactions, then what we're getting is a pattern of learned helplessness, entrenched patterns of behaviour. And so the other thing that I've loved that you've brought to the fore is that sort of sense of make it as easy as you can to do it, to make the right choice.
And to be, just to give a bit of insight as to what impact this has had on my life. You know, I used to have maybe go into their rooms and spend all day, you know, doing the tidying and resenting it as well as everything else. And then it would just go back to mess town in a matter of days because they hadn't got those systems in place to keep it tidy. So now my children can tidy their rooms to 80% of my expectation. It's never going to be perfect because they are young children. But what that means is if I go in to tweak and work with them to help them with that final 20%, it takes more like 15 minutes to top and tail that, and to you know, just to do the final bits. Or when it's Christmas, you help them put away their gifts and toys into the end home system because it's so clear everything can slot in. Or maybe you have a new end home for a new craze, and then another one gets put away because they're older. So it has made a huge difference in my life. It's saved like a day every month or 6 weeks where I just don't have to spend that time at all now because they do it themselves, because they have a system that is easy to use.
I always go about this in a very collaborative way. I made a decision very early on based on my lifetime's experience of working with teenagers as an educational professional, that trust is the most important thing, and intrusion and, you know, throwing things away behind their back is not a great thing. So I always, right from the get-go, have encouraged times with my daughter where we look back over the toys and we decide, stay, go, penned. And particularly in the run-up to birthdays and the run-up to Christmas, that this is about how we're going to make space, how we're going to make space for what's coming that's new, and also coming to a point of choice about what are they ready to leave behind. And I think it's not great to assume what they're ready to leave behind, which is what you do when you take over and do it for them.
Yeah,
it's got to be consensual, because this is also about consent. And, you know, that's a thorny issue in our society, and we can model it in this kind of way. And of course, you know, my daughter's 12. She still wants to be able to revisit old things. And actually, as kids hit the buffers in their teenage years, they often want to circle back to older, more comforting things. So, for instance, with your agenda to sort out, you know, the teddy bears and the plushies from yesteryear, if you take that on, that can be a real disconnector with your teen. So always go about it collaboratively and co-create systems and understanding and dialogue around managing the stuff of life. What do you call it? The daily debris.
The daily debris of life. Yes, absolutely. Wow, this is such a great topic, and I've learned a lot from you in terms of also now planning, you know, for the future and the next stages of evolving, you know, the resort reset phases, I call them, when every 6 months, a year, phases change, and that's, you know, a house is dynamic and we live life and things change. So it's important to just expect that to happen.
That's right. Life is dynamic. And I think you've expressed that so beautifully. And just one thing I wanted to add, just right on that spot, is that parenting teenagers is like hitting a moving target. It's a dynamic process. And that's why your ability to be calm, agile, and creative around the problems of the daily debris of life and the problems of life is your superpower.
And what being sorted throughout your home and within the kids' rooms means is that you have the headspace to address that.
And so do they.
Yeah, because you're not focused on just that angsty stuff where everything's always a mess. There's a level of sorted, which means that you can go, okay, well, we can anticipate this thing coming up now. Let's make space for it. So yeah, it's been really great talking to you. And well, I hope that people watching this, even though it's been fairly in depth, I think it's a fantastic a learning and real thought-provoking thing, whatever age your children are, even if they're not yet teens. It's really anticipating for that future and giving us an insight into what's going on in their heads and how those brains are wired is fascinating.
And also, equally, I feel like I've learned a lot in terms of so many opportunities for parents to connect with their kids, create something that's really powerful, that's going to help their kids in the long term. And as an educator, a lot of what you have said makes so much sense. You know, the dynamic process of your child growing and the challenge that they face as they go from primary school to secondary school, from Key Stage 3, pre-GCSE into the, you know, the really harder stuff where you've got maybe 8 or 9 GCSEs. That's a lot of topics, a lot of plates to spin. And then going forward into A-level, when actually, you know, in that sixth form phase, you're looking at a child who needs to be match fit to leave your home and operate independently. And it's all about creating that ability for them to be responsible. And how do we become responsible? You know, it's response able, you know, being able to respond to something that's going right or that's going wrong, and allowing them to feel that more clearly enables them to take responsibility. So avoid rushing into rescue, and really bearing in mind that idea of the ways in which we can streamline our lives can free up our minds from a great deal of unnecessary anxiety. All behavior is a communication, a skill not yet learned, a need not yet met. All those signs of outer clutter also resonate with what's going on inside the mind. And so it's really helpful to think about this and to make the room a serene haven for sleep and rest, which is also what the heart of the bedroom is all about. So I hope you've all enjoyed listening to, watching this really interesting conversation. Thank you so much, Diana. So I'm Emma Gleadhill. I'm an educational speaker, trainer, professional coach, and I work in the field of well-being, psychological well-being in the home, in school, and healthy relationships. And you can find out more on emmagleadhill.com and subscribe to my newsletter via the homepage if you like the cut of my jib. And Diana, remind us all about your services.
Yeah, so I'm Diana Spellman of Serenely Sorted, and you can find out more at serenelysorted.com, or you can follow me on my Instagram, serenely.sorted. And it's all about helping you to introduce the Serenely Sorted system to your home, whatever is your home makeup is. And one-to-one is always best. And I can teach the system virtually, or I can even come into your home to help you set it up. And depending on your price point and budget, there is also the Serenely Sorted DIY online course, which does include a 30-minute session with me as well. So there is all options for you to learn the system and get that serenity into your lives.
Thank you so much. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.